Welcome. I'm Jason,
And I'm Kai.
and we're your hosts for Conversations. And tonight, we're joined by our guest, Lusen Mendel.
Hey everyone.
So, thank you so much for joining us today. So, Luce is an interview and negotiation coach, and they release videos that help people understand tech, demystify the tech industry, and they help people grow their careers. And they release a lot of this stuff on their channel at Candidate Planet. And they also work with people. And so, I'd like to start out by asking, what is the thing that makes the hiring process so interesting to you, Luce?
Um, that's a good question. It's something that we all end up going through, and it's like scary as hell. And it was like this crazy, weird experience, that I couldn't contextualize as I was going through it. And then over the years, working in industry and I was a programmer, an engineer, and became an engineering manager for a number of years. And then, eventually you don't really know how it happens, but you start to like change the side of the table, not just in that I was interviewing candidates, but like suddenly I was like explaining to employees like, oh, this is how it works. And kind of just it's like I don't even understand how you kind of become a mentor, because it's something you look up to for a long time. Like I remember my first job after college. I remember asking my boss, like, how do you know what to say like for these difficult questions that we're asking? And he was just like, I just put myself in your shoes and I just know. And like, I don't know, that might be my answer today, but it just like happened. So anyway, I've just over time gotten very involved in, as my network has grown, and I used to run some internship programs. I've just kind of built up this, and I used to teach some classes, so it just kind of built up this kind of instructor advice giving kind of situation.
Oh, that is awesome. So let's start in. Like, what is the general advice that you would give somebody who's, joining us here today or stumbled across this video on Twitch or YouTube?
Um, I'm going to be a little contrarian. I mean, I think I hopefully will give some nice general advice, but general advice is super hard. Like what I really love about, certainly one-on-one coaching, and even when I do workshops, I'm asking questions at the beginning, really trying to figure out like, what is a specific scenario that someone is in, trying to understand where someone is at, what their specific goals are, to figure out the next step. So I mean, it might be more helpful to go through some scenarios, or if people want to put in the chat, where they're at, what they're trying to accomplish, what challenges they're running into. Um, I think the main thing is don't is that it's such a stressful process looking for work. It's so high stakes. Or even just being an employee in general. Like if I used to come to work every Monday thinking like, oh my God, my boss might fire me. Like I'm not getting enough done. And it took me like honestly even a year before I was like, oh, there's like feedback processes. Like I would know, it wouldn't be this surprise, but like I just didn't know how things worked. So I guess my general advice is like things are going to be okay. um, Give yourself a break during all of these like new things you're trying to figure out.
Well, and then definitely, this is, of course, a time when people are having a lot of stress about their careers and a lot of
Yeah.
stress about the world. So that's definitely advice that's applicable now.
One question I was wondering about that is sort of how does someone figure out what specifics are relevant?
What specifics? I was about to say, one thing is to treat this process like a little bit of a scientific inquiry, where because there is so little information, and because there's, what I'm really trying to say is, okay, maybe you're job searching. Send out a bunch of applications. Send out 10 applications for within a week or two. See what kind of responses you get. If you get some recruiter conversations, then you kind of you're moving through this pipeline. If you don't hear back from people, then you're like, okay, I have to change something. How do I get noticed? Like maybe that's the problem I need to work on right now, and maybe I need to network, or try some other, adjust what roles I'm going for. Versus maybe you're getting some interviews and they're not going well and you're not moving forward. Okay, that's maybe the thing to focus on. I don't know if your question was maybe like like for a lot of us doing technical craft like based jobs where there's like skill assessments as part of getting a job. One of the things is like, what do I need to learn, or like what do I need to brush up on for this skill assessment? And one of the best things that you can do is, well, there's two sides to this coin, but one thing is you can look through the job description and mine that for all it's worth. Now, it might not always be accurate, but that's one of the favorite games that I like to play, is have candidates, give me a job description and I will guess what your interview process is going to look like. it's, sometimes I can get pretty spot on with those, with figuring that out.
Actually, that brings up that are all these phases in the interview process that are kind of meant to communicate what is expected, but it does feel like we do all this communication in code, and if you don't know how to decode what's there, if you don't speak HR, then there's this thing of, well, nobody told me that this would be a job about that, even though it is kind of in the job description.
Oh, I mean, that's a whole different conversation is once you go through this whole hiring process, and there's a negotiation stage there too. And then at the very end, you get to make a decision about whether or not to join this company. And then you're going to figure out what your actual job is. And that's like your relationship with management and like how, what your responsibilities are is like a whole different ball game.
Definitely had jobs where, I was hired and then I showed up and discovered that I was actually working on an entirely different team on an entirely different project.
Yeah, that feels like a standard tech industry experience for better or worse.
Yeah. I mean, be positive and be intentional about what you accept and what you try and work on in a sense from a meta level. That'll generally that's my general advice. It gets interesting, when I do talk with I have some clients who are underrepresented in tech, engineers of color, women, and there's always that tricky conversation around like it- fitting into a norm versus how do you make someone else comfortable versus your own identity and like when you come out and all those sorts of things. And I'm always cognizant of like we're all making strategic decisions, and sometimes you might strategically decide not to come out or not to negotiate or whatever. As long as you're not doing this out of like a fear, but you're the hero of your story, making a strategic decision in this journey that's going to have many steps. Hopefully that's like doesn't feel like too much of a, I don't know, like going along with the status quo.
I feel like there's part of the difference you're getting at there is sort of the difference between sort of accepting something as this is how it is versus accepting something as this is necessary for the moment.
Yeah, and I mean, it honestly, as engineers, it's like sometimes I don't get to make the product decisions, and like that's not a like everything's going to be better if I just realize, oh, that's not my decision to make. So and you can apply that into all sorts of areas. Like, well, they're going to put me on this other team. I want to get over here. So how am I going to go about that? Yeah, and as a candidate, you're so de-empowered. Like there's so many decisions getting made by other people, and it's like very high stakes for you when you're trying to get a job. And most of the time, a lot of these decisions don't even have anything very specific to do with the person. A lot of rejections are happening because the timeline, they are already in late stages with someone else and they kept the job up, or their budget changed. Like that's happening all over the place now. It's not your fault, or just timing. There's just so many different things. Or the job description said one thing, but actually they really needed this other thing that you don't have, and like you were always going to not be the right fit. Don't take it personally. Or yeah, there's just so many things. Or there was another person internally. They just posted it publicly but they already had someone else in mind. So I mean, that is an interesting question of like, how do you really figure out how you're doing and what to do next? And this is advice I heard from Jose Hernandez, who's a US astronaut, has this amazing story where I think it took him either 12 years or 12 applications, and there might be like multiple years in between when you can apply to a job, where he was like, applying to become an astronaut and getting rejected, and kept persevering. But it wasn't, I love how his advice, it's like, it's not just persevere, guys. I wasn't just sending the same application every time. He's like, I would go and look, well, what's on the resume of the current astronauts? Oh, they know how to scuba dive. Okay, this year I'm going to go learn how to scuba dive. Oh, they know how to speak Russian because, International Space Station. Like, okay, I need to take some Russian courses. And so, to be honest, I've never actually like really worked one-on-one with someone on this, but to some extent, you can do informationals if you can talk to engineers at places or people, doing jobs that you want or at companies where you want, and maybe ask them what are some of the things that they find matter. That actually might be a nice way to figure out that disconnect when you don't realize like, why am I really not passing these interviews or these hiring processes that might be like a bigger gap that I'm not seeing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Both the what you can do and all of the invisible factors in the process that may or may not be in play, and honestly you can't know as a candidate.
Things are so tough right now. Like, uh, yeah, It- take heart.
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting time to be in the job market with a lot of company, because there's a lot of people right now who are looking as the world is kind of disrupted,
Yeah.
and with companies in a real interesting place.
Yeah, there's sort of also, hey, let's apply engineering skills to this optimization problem. Like, how do we make this more efficient? Some companies have really stopped hiring, or they're very cautious. I think interns and early career college grads, people who are switching careers, that a lot of places are sort of closing down what they're doing there. But there's other companies that are doing very well. And so if you can see what kind of recruiting events are happening, like wherever the recruiters are going, like those are recruiters you should talk to because they have opportunities. And so, because it's disheartening to send a bunch of applications and not hear anything. So, if you can go to an event, that'll make things stronger when you then reach out to someone. They'll appreciate that. And it means they're
What do
hiring.
you mean by that? Can you clarify, like, what, like, go to an event, what kind of thing?
Yes. And I mean, it's of course very difficult these days. There's so fewer actual events, and you don't get to like see someone in person. And yeah. I mean, virtually, although to some extent that also opens up now virtual, access across cities and stuff. Looking on Eventbrite, looking at conferences and meetups, and trying to find um, I guess sometimes there's like little talks that are happening in the space around technology. Maybe there's a company sponsoring, and so there might be a recruiter there. You can then, if not message them during the event, it's a lot harder to connect virtually, but you could maybe send them a note on LinkedIn and leave a message whenever you connect, because recruiters get so many connections. If you don't leave a message, they probably don't even like to see you. But put a note, and then the first thing, just say, hey, I went to this event and I saw you at this event and it was fabulous and I'm very interested. Maybe even, and I've applied already. I would love to learn more. And so then they're like, oh, I'm going to go look up your application and move it through.
Yeah. Good old fashioned human connection is really more relevant than we give it credit for.
Yeah, these are interesting times.
So you mentioned earlier that it can help to have kind of a persona, and I do know we had somebody before the today's stream who said that they wouldn't be able to be here because they are in a somewhat different time zone. But
Mm.
I'd love to sort of provide a persona and see, maybe we can talk about what sort of thing you would do with an individual case. So this is somebody who basically came into programming later in life, as many of us did, and currently is in a position but feels like it's kind of dead end. Like, there isn't engineering growth above them at the company they're at, so they're worried their career is kind of stuck. So they're looking for how to get a better job where, yeah, there's better engineering leadership.
Cool. Well, so the nice thing is that when you're currently employed, you can always be looking elsewhere. You can always be sort of opening different doors. Now, that can be very like stressful emotionally, and also just like in terms of the amount of time and work that goes into that. But whenever possible, uh, like stay employed while looking, for many factors, but that'll keep a, that'll keep your runway longer than it might otherwise be. And so the good news is that while you're currently employed, that also means you have things that you can talk about in interviews. I think one of the first things I'd want to ask this individual is try to understand, like, what is the work you're doing right now, and how much are you looking, are you looking to do the same work at a similar company, but just like with a better leadership, better culture, better career track? That's going to be because we're going to, especially once you have some industry experience, some of the interviews you're going to encounter are these behavioral project discussions. People want to know, what have you done previously? Have you been successful previously? And your story is not going to be like, oh, this place is so boring and I, haven't been able to do anything interesting, so I want to leave. As far as anyone else knows, you are happily employed. You've done some great things. You joined this company. You learned a bunch. You've done some great things, and now you're ready for the next challenge and the next step up in your career. And you're really excited about the technology that this company is learning, and you sort of like make that through line that this is the next logical step for you. Um, and and so you sort of tie that together, and it's going to be more straightforward if it's similar work. If I think one of the challenges that can come up is that when we are in it gets sort of stuck in a career tech wise, it makes it harder to then go to like a slightly different technical area. They're asking all these questions about, cloud computing or, deploying in certain ways. And like, we've been doing it a different way. And so you kind of, you want to tell that story. You still want to find what you've been successful at and what can apply. Because a lot of companies are, they're okay with you kind of learning on the job, the specifics. But especially if you are currently employed, you can try to whittle away at some of that knowledge gap, some of the interview preparation a little by little. And that can help. And honestly, again, some of this is just like experimentation. Like maybe before you feel a bunch of pressure to leave, try to get a couple interviews in so that you see like how far away am I? Like, how does this feel? Just so that you can, interview, basically I'm saying like do some interview practice. Um, I mean, we could probably talk about, if I was working with you, I'd like tell you, here's what to expect. And like, let's figure out what you need to work on. But even if there's no, sometimes it's like, it's not an exact science. So if someone's just experiencing the situation, you're like, okay, here's what I need to do. Like for what I'm trying to say is like, you're trying to figure out, do I need to know data structures and algorithms? Is it going to be code challenges? Is it homework? Like, you might have different strengths that you can play to. And so, and you might be able to find companies that do the things that you are good at. And you might also have time to prepare certain things. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be an algorithm whiz to maybe make it enough through a coding interview to have the conversation where the person's like, oh, wow, you're a great person. And we want to hire you. So it's going to be a little bit of both practice and strategy. That was a long answer.
It's a complicated question.
Yeah, a lot of information in it.
Cool. So, one thing I want to say again is one of the difficult things I think when people are moving companies, especially like midstream, is that you do have some. So one of the challenges is just like a gap or a difference in technical competency or experience, and the other challenge could be that you and it could be technical competency gap, or it could be like, I want to be a manager, but I didn't have that opportunity here. It's very difficult to make horizontal or vertical changes through jumping companies versus internally, like through an internal promotion. Just as a heads up, it's not impossible, but the other challenge that can come up is that like bad things have happened and people shoot themselves in the foot by saying negative things about that. And so you might have had, well, the way I like to pose this, because I guess what I'm trying to say is, unfortunately, there's a lot of people who have been in bad situations with bad managers or bad coworkers or whatever. And here's my advice around that, because you don't want to say negative things. It's just not a good first like conversation look. We're not intimate enough for me to hear those details. Employment is a relationship, but an interview is like first date. So the way you want to pose that is, I encountered these challenges. Oh, my manager was quite busy. So, we ended up picking up, you kind of want to say, here was this challenge. It was difficult. Here's what I did about it to be successful. And then just keep looking forward, like as much as possible, transition the conversation to all the great things about this new company. And I'm really looking forward to working at a startup where I can continue to use those generalist skills to really, get my hands dirty in whichever way is needed or something.
That makes a lot of sense, particularly about, tuning the story. We have a question from chat. So Beth asks, says, it sounds like doing an interview can be as much of a learning experience as doing an interview can be as much of a learning experience as the job interview. So do you advise not starting with your dream company? Do you recommend starting with your second choice? You can hone your story.
That's a good question. To some extent, yeah, maybe here's what I recommend, honestly, if you're early in the process, is to try to apply to like 12 to 20 places. And I don't mean going on like Indeed or LinkedIn, like on a job board and just like sending applications, unless you have a very specialist, I'm doing Elixir or something that's pretty specialist. I've seen that be successful in those cases. But I mean, like sending in applications where you've like tried to track down the recruiter on LinkedIn and also message them and go to their career page. But I would say, send in a bunch of applications and try to have a few different clusters. You're going to have the applications for jobs and companies you think are really great. You're going to have some that you think this is maybe this is a backup, or this is more likely, this is more, this is more risky, and sort of see what happens. um some of the big companies do have this like limit, like you can't apply again for a year, like some like Google and things sort of have these limits. um but a lot of other companies are amenable to persistence, and there's no like hard policies. So I guess, doing a little doing a little reconnaissance where you do like you apply to some company you don't really care about, go through that interview process, and then make a plan and figure out like, okay, do I need to prepare for like 1 or 2 weeks, or is this like a 3 month, what is my strategy? What's my timeline? How much leeway do I have? How much do I want to invest in this? Perfect is the, what is it? Perfect is the enemy of getting shit done. um, I don't remember what that phrase is.
I think that's it now. That's the new version. We've got it. So let's see. So one of the things you mentioned in your bio, you mentioned that you're an interview and negotiation coach. So we've talked a lot about interviews, but negotiation.
Oh yes, negotiate. What the funny thing is, I haven't really ever negotiated my own compensation. I'm not like telling this to the public. I hope they don't think I'm a fraud. I've helped so many people negotiate their compensation and signing bonuses and work responsibilities and all sorts of things. And I think maybe my interest in it is just that I find it very difficult. Like there are so many reasons why people don't negotiate, and I like know like I feel all of it, all of the reasons. But you know, it's part of creating a healthy work relationship. Really, is like having boundaries in a general sense, like being able to feel like you have some agency in the relationship, about work responsibilities, or your growth, and certainly compensation is a big part of it. Um, Also the funny thing is, as a manager, I don't think we should be allowing negotiation. I think it's our job to properly figure out, like, assess people and figure out how much, like, what they should be rewarded. Like, that's literally our job responsibilities. But that's not the world we live in, at least not all places. And so, if someone's going to get a signing bonus, like, why not you? Right? Like, this is the game we play. I'm going to help people play the game. Yeah, maybe we should move on to like a specific negotiation question.
So actually, I think that's a great point, though. What you were saying about it is we can recognize that this is a process that kind of is inherently unfair, but that while it's there, it shouldn't be the folks who are disadvantaged who are the ones who are predominantly bearing the brunt of an unfair process. So
Yeah, I mean, it's
yeah,
crazy. It's crazy to me that the people I want to have on a team, like when I'm interviewing as a hiring manager or as an interviewer, when I'm interviewing people, I'm looking for like collaborative and can get along and, take one for the team, and I mean, sure, I want initiative and, all these other skills, but like our day-to-day jobs are like not preparing us to negotiate. And so it's just a skill, that people can pick up. And one way that can be helpful for people who do feel like shy, or kind of just don't even have that kind of worldview for negotiation, is just that it is a conversation where you are going to, you get to ask all the questions that you want to ask. Like, it's fine to ask questions, and it is fine to assert things that you're interested in, and like that's not rude. You can do it in a polite way. You can also do it in a strategic way. Like, you don't want to like send an email with like 30 demands. Negotiations are actually very short. Ideally, conversations in person. That's people ask me all the time, oh, can I just do it as an email because I get stressed in person? I'm like, you'll be so much more effective in person because there's tone. You can respond to what, you can make someone flinch, but then you can hear what they say, and then move forward within minutes, rather than them like assuming you're not interested in like going with some, like there's way less risk, even though it's scarier in person, especially if you practice. But yeah, it's just going to be this very short, stressful conversation, and you may not get everything that you want. Like, I don't think the point of, it's not like you win a negotiation because you like got all these things. But my goal when I work with candidates is that they feel like they don't have any regrets. Like, I asked all the questions, I got the best opportunity I could have, that I then got to decide upon. And it might be that nothing changed, but like now I know, and I can feel proud of myself for that.
it also feels like there's an aspect there of sort of before you go in, figuring out what do you actually need versus what would be nice if you can get it.
That's it. I tell people we need to figure out two numbers for each of the things you care about, or numbers or whatnot. But yeah, like what is your walk away number? What's your minimum? And what's the thing you want to ask for that like you would be just like, it'd be an easy decision if they were just like, yep, we'll give you that thing. And you're just like, great, I'm like over the moon. Um, and so that really then there's sort of three scenarios then that happen based on that. How do you maybe you get a really great offer and you're like, oh, maybe my expectations were very low, because a lot of people have been underpaid, and how do any of us know what to ask for? I think that's like the $1,000,000 question, right? So,
That is literally the question we just got in chat.
oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. How do you know where to begin?
How do you know where to begin? Okay. Well, obviously there's, Glassdoor and websites online, and that's one avenue of input. I mean, my answer here is going to be, I'm going to list a few different inputs. Okay. And then at the end of the day, it's still like it's still a magic number. So there's websites that just have numbers. If you can, I recommend trying to find Slack communities or private groups that have, like in your field. Like there's a DevRel Slack, developer relations Slack community, for example, or there's a, sysadmins in, Houston, Texas, right? Like if you can find the group that, where you can more privately, talk amongst yourselves. If you can, if depending on the size of the company, if you can talk to an employee or a recent past employee of that company and just, you might not, they might not want to say exactly what their salary was, but they might be able to tell you how things work. Here's the salary ranges. Here's what here's the signing bonus. Here's some other perks. Like here's other things that people asked for. Just so you know how things work. You don't want the recruiter to think you're going behind their back, but like they might do backdoor references of you. So I think going backdoor is like, it's fine. Again, as long as you're being polite. What's another source? Oh, there's some companies that have their compensation and everything public, like GitLab, for example, and they'll even have a calculator. So maybe GitLab doesn't apply to you because you're in a different city or the different roles, but you can use the calculator to see, oh, GitLab thinks Seattle is this percent of San Francisco. So now I can apply that same percent to this other piece of information I got. It's like this huge math equation. Oh, and of course you can ask the recruiter. Like one of my favorite questions whenever a recruiter is asking you, like, what would you like to earn? Because they're very good at asking questions. They're used to playing this game. So ask those questions back first. Like, well, what's the range for this role? Do you offer a signing bonus? So sometimes the recruiter will tell you how things work, maybe the hiring manager. And it doesn't look, to me, it doesn't look greedy. It looks like you're interested if you want to know how things work, and that you have a care about you take this commitment seriously. The last input is going to be yourself. Like there literally is no right or wrong answer. All these numbers are made up. Like all money is monopoly money. And so, obviously we feel bad when we realize other people are getting more than us for the same work. Like, well, we're really, that can feel bad. And of course you need to figure out like what your financial goals are for immediately and for long term. But all I'm trying to say is that the numbers that one person might want can be completely different than another person, and that's fine. Like at the end of the day, it's you feeling okay with the situation because you're the only one who's going to make the decision about whether to take this job or not. So, so that's like magic. That's a magic answer.
Well, and you alluded there to something that there are a lot of these numbers that it's not just, I think a lot of people think of it in terms of just what will the salary be, but there are questions like how much time off will I have? How many hours will I be working?
Yep.
What is healthcare going to look like? At least if you're in the US, where if you don't have employer healthcare, you don't have healthcare.
Employee stock plan. There's like so many different things. 401k match. I mean, some of these things you can't really negotiate. Like they're just company policies. And they're not going to make an exception for you. Here's how I look at it. There's all these different pillars or dimensions of things that are part of an offer. Pick the thing that's the most important thing, and have that negotiate that first. Which is often it is often base pay, because that is it has a big impact, and it's a big it's a big lever that you get to then, that's a good one. And here's the thing: the recruiters will often say like, "Oh, here's the whole package, and you can't compare this to other places because it's the whole thing." It's totally acceptable to say like, "But this one thing matters to me, and I just want to talk about this one first." And then once you've talked about that first pillar, then you can say, "Okay, now let's move to the second pillar, which might be a signing bonus or equity or time off, or you get to have whatever order you want for things." And the nice way of going in priority order is that it may be if you didn't get everything you wanted in the first pillar, maybe they can make it up for you in a signing bonus, because hey, a signing bonus is not a commitment more than 1 year usually, so like that's easier for companies to do. Or stocks, which is that's even easier for the bottom line in some ways. So that's one way to go about that. Yeah.
Cool. So I do want to add, since I'm seeing some great discussion in chat, if anybody has any questions for Luce, please just go ahead and like put question at the front so that we see it, and we will make sure that we ask. So another question inspired by, again, real events I've seen. What do you do in a situation where you find that you have maybe made a bad negotiation in the past and you're feeling kind of underpaid for the work you're doing and you want to change that?
Hmm. Um, well, there's two ways to change that. One is at your current employer, ask for a raise, and or promotion. Leveling up is often a nice way to really get a big bump. Um, Again, I think it's always helpful for, I think managers, it is always helpful for you to be open with your manager, even from the beginning, even when you first start working somewhere, to be interested in, how do things work here? How do I grow? How do I have a bigger impact at this company? That is what a career trajectory is. And it is also okay to also say like, hey, getting raises is an important part of of what I'm interested in. The squeaky wheel gets the attention, gets the oil. Even as a manager myself, where I was very aware of these sort of disparities, and what I would have all of my reports ask me for a raise every performance review, just so they could practice doing it. And the main thing is, write the bullet points for your manager. Like, write the bullet points, and don't be afraid to say a specific number. And then, failing that, it's about a timeline, because sometimes, um, sorry, but just to finish this point, which is, even me knowing like, hey, everyone, I should be able to proactively determine who gets a raise or not. Honestly, it's the people who just like kept badgering me that I gave them more attention and more consideration. So just asking is very important. Um, Often I think people wait too long. They wait until they've received their performance review, and like literally it's been delivered to them by their manager, and they're like, okay, cool, it was really positive, like, can I get a raise? That is way too late. Like, as a manager, these decisions often are getting made like sooner. Like, often I'm having to tell leadership like for months in advance, like, hey, this person's doing really great and they're on track, and let's allocate budget. I mean, different places will do things in different ways, and they'll have different policies, and the same thing about like percents. Sometimes you can't get a raise above a certain percent. Sorry, I can go really deep on this topic. I think what I'm trying to say is, at the worst case, when you bring it up to your manager, if they say, we can't do that right now, that's fine. The good news is, you just have to ask, well, what's the timeline? Like, what is the next role, especially if you're trying to get like a promotion, because that, again, that can come with a big bump. What are the bullet points that you need to see for me to get to this next level? And let's check in every month, and at the next performance review, like let's have a plan for the next performance review. Like, what manager wouldn't love that? And really try to make that happen. So yeah, so I think that's one strategy. Obviously, then the other strategy is to, and I've seen this before, where someone knew they were underpaid, and this wasn't maybe even performance based. It was just like an inequity in their system. And that's the thing, by the way. You can get raises for performance, like as a performance reward, versus you're not being paid at the right level, and then you get like a comp adjustment. And those are different things. And sometimes it's, often the comp adjustment, maybe that can come out of cycle, but maybe, the performance improvement might only come on there's also, just figuring out what the policies are can be like a whole thing. But some places, their policy, they can't give you a raise, even if you're really underpaid. I worked with someone who, like, she could only get a small bump. Like, they're just like, it's not our policy to give you a 20% raise. So even though we know that there's a big problem here after 15 years of you working here, we can't fix it.
And that's exactly the same situation that
this
that I
person.
saw was this somebody who had a long tenure, had started as an intern, and again had come in with a what was a nice reasonable amount that, of course, they didn't negotiate fresh out of college, but then just over a career of limited raises that compounded until
Okay, here's
they were senior and discovered they were underpaid.
oh no, it breaks my heart. And here's the thing. Here's the kicker too. Is sometimes those will be the same companies where you come with an outside offer, and suddenly they're like, oh, bam, here's another $20,000. Which it's like two wrongs do not make a right. Like this to me, this is like a mind blowing. Like they're forcing their employees to go look elsewhere. Other companies, by the way, if they know that you're looking for work, they might sometimes disloyalty can have negative repercussions. You want to be very careful about. You want to kind of know which policy this place has, and be strategic about how you go about it. But yeah, the nice thing also about looking is that that's all it's confirmation. Even if you feel like kind of, you feel meh about, like, before you feel really crappy about where you are, before you realize that you're greatly underpaid or that this isn't a great culture, sometimes, and I've actually never done this, and I've actually only ever I've only ever applied to one company at a time, which is like such bad. Like the more you can have multiple offers to consider at a time, just like the better. The more information you have about what you might like, and you can certainly play them off each other. But sometimes just getting that confirmation, applying somewhere before you've left, that'll let you know what else is reasonably possible for you. Sometimes, I mean, I've had reports. Sometimes I've this isn't good company policy, but sometimes I've chatted with reports and been like, well, maybe you do want to look somewhere else, and because we can't do this thing. And then they'll come back and say, you know what, I couldn't find something as good as this, so I'm here. I mean, it's not an ideal situation, but you're kind of like, yeah, okay, cool. Like, at least now, right?
Well, that does get at kind of the dual role of the manager here, kind of tracing a little bit away from interviews and negotiation. That thing of loyalty to the company versus loyalty to the people you manage. And that question of when, as a manager, do you say, hey, you need to, maybe leaving is right. I certainly, at one point, somebody came to me and said, hey, can you get, can you guarantee me this promotion that we both agree I deserve? And I'm like, no, I really can't say that you're going to get, and they had another offer. And so
Yeah.
like the what I know that what the company wanted me to say was, of course I can get you this, with no, no
Ugh.
promise. But and instead they left, and it was good for their career and bad for the company that had them. But yeah,
Yeah. Honestly, I think so. I think honest, like having some authenticity in a relationship, you want to have a healthy relationship. And so that generally means not promising things you can't deliver on, right? Because for a long-term relationship, I don't think the company should have had that policy in a sense. Um, I also think that this is, I don't know if this is a hot take or not, but like most individuals are replaceable. I mean, that's sort of like the capitalist corporate machine. And I think anyone who thinks otherwise is sort of deluding themselves, no matter how high up they are. Because the flip side of this is that I've seen so many times where people really rise to the occasion and like do a great job, like basically believe in people, they will do great things. The flip side of that is like no one person is like amazing and like is irreplaceable. Um, so to some extent, I think companies from an organizational point of view just need to be okay with individuals leading good lives and having careers that don't always require 100% loyalty. Certainly companies these days are somewhat less loyal to their employees, so you need to have a reciprocating relationship for that to be, I think, again, healthy.
that fits with something that I think somebody told me once as I was moving into management myself, and the idea that you're balancing out the everybody is just a number in a kind of a system that you're kind of keeping humming, with each person is a unique individual with hopes and dreams. Because
Mm.
if you go completely down, each person is a unique individual and their hopes and dreams, the moment that somebody gets sick or has to go help with a relative or wins the lottery or just decides to leave, every plan you have is thrown into chaos. But if all you ever do is think of people as as a number that you have there, you'll never get the best that anybody's capable of. And
Yeah, and
drawing
that's
that line
that's
between the two.
yeah, that's deeply dehumanizing. Here's the thing: I think middle managers are like the unsung heroes of like all of our work. Like we have this, I think, a little bit of this like cultural worship of like supreme leaders, executives and, all of this. And then executives are often trying to talk to like all the ICs, but middle managers, every person in a company like has a manager. Like there's, like that's your middle managers are your levers for culture and people feeling, seen and heard and actually growing at a company. So I love middle management. I have zines. I've made a whole zine series and podcast about middle management. So it's something that I think can be quite powerful. Yeah.
Is that something that is online anywhere?
Stay calm comic. Stay. What? How do I do this?
Excellent. Excellent. And we'll get some links up as well.
Staycalmcomic.com will find a bunch of different zines and comics around gender identity and middle management.
Which are both important topics that touch a lot of people's lives.
Yep. I'll let you guys guess which came first, the tattoos or the comics.
So let's see. You mentioned actually gender identity and tech in the workplace, and we've talked a lot about basically folks coming from a lot of different backgrounds. So do you have any particular advice you give to folks who have maybe a less common gender identity, or in some other way are coming from a community that's disadvantaged coming into the tech workplace?
Oof. It's again, I think specifics will really help with this situation because companies and teams and workplaces are all in a lot of different places. The ideal is that you work somewhere that is very welcoming, where maybe you're not even a token, like there's already some diversity there or some allies. Um, and so that would be ideal. I've certainly seen places that where people are having to make tough choices about coming out, essentially. Their coworkers are always taking them to the bar and like pointing out girls to them and, ask, they're trying to be friendly and form this like heteronormative relationship with the new guy who's just like, I don't know if I can be gay here or something. I've also in a lot of places, it's the non-binary or the trans person who's trying to advocate for like let's put pronouns in places, and I can't tell you how many times I've seen this where suddenly there's pronouns on the employee, like in where like they list all the employees, and it's like, oh wow, there's actually like 10 other non-binary people here who just like never weren't saying anything, uh anyway, it's a difficult situation, and I think we all have to choose what we're ready for. When I've had leadership that's been very antagonistic in a lot of different ways, it's made me not want to bring my I'm like I haven't it has made me not want to bring myself like authentic self there, because and for me I'm just like screw you guys, like you don't deserve to know who I am. Like that's how I rationalize it to myself. And whereas when I'm been able to find places that feel more comfortable, you can really be a sometimes you feel like you can sort of step up and step forward.
That makes a lot of sense. During the actual job hunting process, do you have any advice for folks who are still kind of settling on where to apply, on how to find a good place where they feel like
Hmm.
they can bring more of their self to work?
Um, hmm. I was gonna say, you can treat how much you disclose in the same way that you treat negotiation, and that what are the things you would walk away from, and what are your asks, and that can help you, figure out what you want to say up front versus not. I would generally say you don't have to disclose anything until you get an offer. I even think be very careful with the questions you're asking. It is very valuable and important to ask questions in interviews, but like you're still being interviewed until you get an offer. Like everything is curated. They're doing background checks on you. Like you don't have to tell someone that you're like 6 months pregnant, or like you don't have to tell someone that you actually have this other name or like whatever. I mean, I do think you're trying to think about, as a long-term relationship, is this going to be weird if I come to work on day one and then like surprise, no one wants surprises at work, managers or employees. And so you might want to figure out like at what point do I have this conversation. And so you're sort of trying to model that in your mind. In terms of finding companies, it's like so crazy I don't know if you guys experience this. Like when I think of my career path, it's like so random. Um, Maybe that's why we give advice.
I think that's true for a lot of people. Yeah.
It's like do these other things, learn from my mistakes. There's a website, actually should look it up. Is it called, like, I want to say Key Value, but that sounds like a database. It's like Key. I'll have to look it up. Maybe we can put a link somewhere. But there is a, I know there
Yeah.
is a there's like a website where it's companies have shared uh some of their key, yeah, key principles or key values, and so you can kind of match in that way. I mean, here's the thing, I honestly think most
Aha.
corporations. Oh, did you find it?
Yep, it is called key values. Let me bring it up here on screen for us.
Nice.
It
Yep,
apparently is a
that's it.
database.
It is I mean, yeah, it is a database, so it's a nice double pun. And I mentioned this because I've heard people say, "Oh, I've used this and it was helpful." Because I think there's a lot
Mhm.
of BS out there, especially from corporations, like you know talking the talk but not walking the walk. The best thing you can do is, I think, meet employees. If you can see leadership talk, like give talks, for example, anyone who's like out, externally facing. Um, but I think talking to people and talking to middle managers, middle managers are going to sit right in between and like what the actual culture is like and what the practices are.
Oh, cool. So yeah, we'll put a link to that in the description later on.
Yep.
But that's a real cool resource. Thanks for sharing that.
My other advice is like, it's just a job. Like, find your find your community outside of work. That might be like terrible. Like, that might be me being like, definitely underrepresented in tech and like, getting on with my coworkers, but not being the like, it's seldom have I found a workplace where it's like, oh, these are my people.
And
That might
actually,
be, yeah.
that's true too. You're talking about find your community. I have seen a number of folks who found their job through their community, and that can
Mm,
be a good way of pre-vetting that whatever community you're part of, your workplace is good for it.
that's a great way to do it. Yeah, for sure.
Oh, cool. So, just quick catch up with chat. Yeah, looks like yeah, no new questions. All right. Let's see. I think we've got just a little bit of time left. So, say, what would you say is the biggest thing that you'd like to see more of in the tech industry?
Hmm. I mean, like, just in general, or for like employees and candidates? That's a big question. I mean,
I'll say
here's
just in general. Like,
yeah,
what
in
would
general.
if you could transform the tech industry? What would you want to see in it?
Um, okay, one thing I'm deeply troubled by, this is related to candidates, is just, this is top of mind, is like the amount of preparation that has to go into like passing interviews. It's troubling. And I don't know if the space is becoming more competitive, if that's part of it. I think the other trend is, I'm a little troubled by engineers being kind of like widgets or something, like the factoryization of work kind of troubles me. Like, I want us as humans to be able to find work um that is more holistic, and like, yes, there are chores, like, I do the dishes every day, like, there's chores at work, but also, as a human, I bring my creativity and autonomy and experimentation in different ways, and like, social interactions. So um I don't know that this is endemic to tech, but maybe a little bit, just because sometimes in tech we can be very like focused on like data driven optimization. And I don't know, like, I think I make a lot of good decisions with my body, and like that's there's something holistic that maybe we're missing out on.
Oh,
It's
that makes
like,
actually a lot of sense.
it's funny, right? Because we're engineers, like, we're used to making trade-offs, like, we're used to like everything's about balance. Like, there's no extreme that's very helpful. So like, how can we, yeah, bring that into our work maybe?
So we did just get one more question in the chat. What are some good ways to develop the skills to move into middle management? Should you be thinking about sort of management from the beginning and kind of proto management, or can you move there later?
You can definitely move there later. I mean, I think you can have like 7 different careers over your life or something. I think one thing that can be helpful is get involved in onboarding new hires, get involved in mentorship programs, from both directions. Maybe you can find a mentor to help you learn mentor or to learn about management. I mean, management has a lot of different components. Whenever you have interns, see if you can be, a point of contact or a mentor for an intern. There is that relationship side of management, and certainly like onboarding and that thing. The other side of things is assessment and decision making. I really love Sam Kainer's Facilitator's Guide to Participatory Decision-Making. Check out that book. I think it's very approachable. It's got a lot of pictures. And that's, but like I think more generally, like as a manager, your judgment really matters. And so just learning about how things work can be helpful. Sorry, there's like a ton of things I want you to learn. This is irrelevant for becoming a manager in the sense that like people become managers, like just how to put yourself in the path of opening those doors is maybe a separate question. But it's something I think that can be really nice to try. Often it's for engineers, it's often like become a team lead, get involved in figuring out how to distribute work and how to, pair with different people, or, break down an architecture, help other people be successful. Honestly, the most important thing you can do to be seen as working towards management is communication, and being able to summarize what is happening and figure out what is the salient thing that like my manager or my, the person up there wants to know. Or usually it's upward, basically. That's what leadership wants in their middle managers, is like someone who can just summarize the important things. In many ways, that's how you'll be seen as a manager.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and joining us. So before we go here, where can people find you if they want to see more of your stuff, or if they want to work with you?
Awesome. And I just want to say thank you so much for having me on. This was fun. It's my first Twitch stream. And thanks everyone who's been chatting away. And I'm gonna have to go back and look at that chat afterwards to see all the great things you've been saying. You can find my YouTube videos on Candidate Planet. If you go to candidateplanet.com, you can find those videos. That's the name of the channel on YouTube. And to be honest, I'm doing a lot less coaching these days, but I'm always happy to answer an email or a LinkedIn message. So lucen@candidateplanet.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to hear from people and help out with, an interview plan or a negotiation. And if it's something that's interesting, it helps me put it in a video for everyone else. That's cool.
Awesome. Again, thank you so much for joining us today, and thanks everybody for watching.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.